In the risk-based testing video, we looked at how to use risk to drive test design. What we did then was we identified risks that threaten the cardinal objectives or the goals of the project itself. These goals typically defined by the senior stakeholders, the sponsors if you like. In this video, I want to look at those goals themselves and use those goals to drive the testing. We use the language of the business or stakeholder goals to formulate a goal-based testing approach. There's a big similarity between risk-based testing and what I'm going to call goal-based testing. But there's quite a subtle difference as well that we need to pay attention to, of course. Now, if you remember from the risk-based testing video, a risk threatens one or more of the project's cardinal objectives and has an uncertain probability. Now, these cardinal objectives are, if you like, the business goal that we are looking to demonstrate have been met by our system. Now clearly this happens towards the end, if not at the end of a project before it goes live. So the purpose of the project is to achieve these business goals. Everybody in the project, their mission is to deliver software that works, that supports and operates in the context of a business process and its user community, to deliver the business benefit, the business goal, the cardinal objectives, if you like. It's these goals that are what the senior stakeholders or the sponsors are actually investing in. Now, of course, the sponsors need to know whether they're getting what they've paid for, if you like. They want to know whether the project will deliver or has delivered these benefits. Now, testing and the evidence we produce from testing can demonstrate to some degree the project goals could or would or can be achieved. Now, that sounds very kind of weak and weaselly, if you like, in terms of a definition of what we're trying to achieve here. But it's a fundamental truth that testing can't prove anything mathematically. It can only provide evidence, and that evidence has to be constructed in a way that supports people's decision making. That's how it works. So we're always working at this level of testing, demonstrating to some degree. If we look at risk-based testing as a comparison to what we're going to talk about with goals, with risks we use the language of risk to define patterns of failure and from that define test objectives. Those objectives are to stimulate the system to behave certain ways to trigger these failures that we fear. If we attempt to cause the system to fail and it fails, we can fix it, repair it and retest. If it doesn't fail, we become more confident that actually the risk could be assessed at a lower level and it's not so scary after all. Now with goal-based testing, it's a little bit different. We use the language of the goal to define, if you like, patterns of behaviour that will help us understand whether a goal has been met. We use the language of the goal itself to define some test objectives. Now these objectives tend to focus on key business milestones, if you like, or triggers. And we often have to use user journeys in particular to trace paths through the system as if we were operating the system in order to achieve the business goal. And these goals could be to market a new product, to save money, to automate a manual process, and so on. Now, a good test strategy will focus mostly on a risk-based approach. And the goals and the goal-based testing tend to happen towards the end of the project because we want to use a risk-based approach to find all the bugs and flush them out and fix them, of course. But finally, the users need some evidence that the system will do exactly what they want in the context of their business processes and their user community. So a goal-based approach gives us the final evidence that it works, whatever works means. Now, goal-based sounds like, aren't we looking for bugs anymore? No, but we need to be careful that we don't lose sight of the fact that we need to do both risk-based and goal-based in our projects. It's almost inevitable we do both. Now, the aim of every project, if you think about it, is to deliver a high-quality system, and that should be the goal of the testers too. Now, the only way we can do that is to find and fix the bugs and then show in some way through test evidence the system working the way it really ought to work. So it fundamentally is our aim too. The tester's aim is to deliver a high quality system. But in reaching that point in the project, we certainly attempt to find bugs, and we use the risk-based approach to do just that. So I want to suggest that bugs are a byproduct of what we do, not the end deliverable. We don't just test to find bugs, we test to demonstrate the system does what it should do for the people who are funding and investing in it. So ultimately, we want to demonstrate the system working. We need both a risk-based approach and some degree of goal-based testing, and that's what we would normally fit into an acceptance test activity. So testing explores how risks can be addressed, but also it explores how goals are met. And as we demonstrate features and functionality and processes working, it builds stakeholder confidence. So they're more confident in their decision to accept and to go live, let's hope. If we use business goals to steer test activity, that is to help us design our tests in the first place, we design tests to demonstrate specific goals being supported or even achieved, perhaps. This evidence that we produce as we run these kind of tests builds confidence, assuming they pass. Obviously, we don't want late failures, but sometimes they occur. But if we follow the same process, we fix and retest and maybe regression test too. But ultimately what we're trying to do is provide a set of tests which demonstrate the system doing what it should as per the goals of the stakeholders. So goal-based tests provide a kind of a final check the system meets its objectives, and hopefully at the same time we reduce the fears of stakeholders in going live. Now, you recall this page in the risk-based testing video. I talked about risks and using the same language to generate a test objective. It's very similar with the goals. With goals, the goal might be to launch and sell a new product using a new process and channel, let's say. So the objective reasonably could be something like to demonstrate the features required to support the end-to-end sales process operate correctly. That's a long-winded way of saying, does it do what we require to achieve the goal? But essentially the test objectives are demonstrations. It's probably the easiest way to explain as demonstrations. We expect them to pass because we've done all the serious risk-based testing previously. Just to compare and contrast goal versus risk-based, it's very often the case that if you create a risk-based test approach and you create a test plan, let's say, following a risk-based approach, the tests you create might look very similar to what you would create if you were adopting a goal-based approach. Although the risk-based tests are trying to stimulate failures, obviously those failures are in the areas which are most critical to demonstrating the overall goal of the system is being met. So there's a very fine line between what a risk-based test looks like and what a goal-based test plan looks like. But you kind of need both, because you need to both have a risk-based approach to find the bugs, but you also need to do this kind of final demonstration, this production of evidence to show the system will meet its cardinal objectives. Now you might think of these final tests, these acceptance tests as like showroom demonstrations, but they're critical in getting the confidence of stakeholders. They have to see the system doing what they want. So what's our strategy overall? Our goal-based test objectives are usually not enough, so we don't just do acceptance testing, if that makes sense. We need a risk-based approach to drive out the vast majority of problems, to detect to cause failures, to detect bugs, to fix bugs, and to refine the system over time. The goal-based tests might be a demonstration or even a run view, a bit of a ceremony almost. It could look like that. But for closure of the stakeholders, they need to see these kinds of tests. So our strategy is founded on risk-based, but is, if you like, the icing on the cake could be our goal-based tests, our acceptance or demonstration tests at the end of the project.